Question number 5 is going to be, what is the number one skill wholesalers underestimate in needing? Let's go with Steve.
I think the big thing, and we talked about it last week with Eric Brewer, and we had talked about it with Larry Ash, is leadership, right? Leading people. Like sales and marketing, you can figure out sales as a skill you can learn. You can figure out marketing, that's just copying and pasting from your friends, right? So leadership is leading people. People is the X factor in your business. If you can't recruit people, if you can't train people, if you can't lead people, and you're having high turnover, you're going to have a really hard time in this business. So I think leadership, leading the people to empower them to do what they want to do, fitting that within your vision, I think that is the single most valuable skill. And I think wholesalers may not value that initially. I think they figure that out much, much later on in their business.
All right. RJ Bates.
So I'm going to go with the ability to underwrite a deal. I think this is the number one thing that everyone complains about with wholesalers. And then it's also part of the reason why we're probably getting scrutinized, and there's talks about regulations on the wholesaling industry. When you're talking about underwriting a deal, we have a responsibility to our cash buyers, essentially our customers, to understand where they need to deal, how to actually analyze it. And so we're making sure when we're making an offer, it's a legitimate offer to a seller that can be performed on. And so I think over and over and over again, we want to talk about how to close a seller, how to talk to a seller, how to do marketing. But what about the nuts and bolts? I get it. It's not sexy. It's not fun to talk about, but it's necessary to understand how to properly comp and underwrite a deal.
All right. Let's go over to Chris Jefferson.
Yeah, man, I think this is really simple, actually. I think the number one skill set you got to have is discipline. I think you can be great at all these things that everybody's saying. I think you can be a great entrepreneur. You can be charismatic. You can be whatever you want. But, I mean, if you want to be a wholesaler and you don't have discipline and consistency, you're just not going to get very far. This is a business that beats you up on a daily basis. You got to be willing to get up every single day, do things in your business without knowing if it's going to directly return a revenue to you or not. So I think it's discipline, man. I think you got to be able to get up every day, fight the fight in your business, fight for your dream, whatever that might be, and you got to push forward. So number one skill set by far is discipline. I think that is a skill.
Love it. All right, Leon Barnes.
So my answer is leadership. But because Steve used it, I can't use that. So I'm going to go to delegation, and here's why. A lot of people get into this business to be their own business owner, and they have the e-myth that they can come and they can do deals. They invest in how to do more deals and continue to scale the business. But what they forget to do is learn how to find other people to do the things that they're weakest at. So I see on a daily basis that people really truly struggle with delegating and try to do too many things. So when thinking about the things that they miss the most is, how can I find someone to do this for me so I can focus on the highest revenue generating activities?
Okay. The voting and the floor is now open, gentlemen.
So Leon, you got to figure out something going on with your camera. And CJ, he explained discipline, but then he said discipline, and then he defined grit. So I don't know where he was going with that. He gave one answer and then explained a different answer. So I'm not really sure. And I forgot real quick. Shout out to the you. All right, go ahead, RJ.
Here's the thing. Steve and Leon, they made sure their answer was under the pretense that the wholesaler wants to scale up a business and actually has a team. I mean, at least CJ's answer was applicable. I mean, you have to have consistency. I agree with that. But Steve, what are you talking about with leadership? I mean, if you're a solopreneur and you're just trying to be a wholesaler that does 2 to 3 deals a week, are you leading yourself? Is that what you're referring to?
I mean, the hardest person to lead is yourself, right? Like, we're all great coaches, but are we all great students, right? Like, first person to lead is ourselves, right? But yeah, to your point, if you're a solo wholesaler, leadership isn't as important, but at that point, you still got to lead other people, right? You got to lead the seller, the title. You still got to lead the title person to do their job correctly. You still got to get the hard money person to fund the deal 2 or 3 days prior to close. So you still have to lead people. It's not as paramount as after you have people, but you still have to lead people.
Leon's answer was so bad, he just removed himself.
No, he did. But the reason I say discipline is because I've had thousands of students, right? Here's the number one, and no shot at anybody who's ever been a student. Here's one of the things that I see from a lot of people. You know how many people I've seen, man, that have made $5,000 on a deal, $10,000 on their first deal, even $30,000 on their first deal, but did not have or maintain the discipline to keep going? How many people have gotten the information of how to do the business and gotten some progress? Like making your first call to a seller is progress. Getting a property in a contract, even if it doesn't close, that's progress, right? And so it's discipline to keep going when that contract falls through and it's your first one and you thought you were making 10 grand and you put everything into that. Now it's zero. It takes discipline to get back up and push this thing another day to get these things done.
So, Chris,
I really think it's discipline.
I appreciate you saying that, but that goes back to our last point, right? Which was that what RJ and I were talking about. When you get punched in the mouth, you get kicked in the nuts in this business, because it's going to happen. When closing is supposed to happen, it doesn't happen. Will you get back up, right? And I think that's the grit, the ego to withstand challenges. Because I think a lot of people, that's what we're saying, like you have to have some innate talent, innate abilities. When you get punched in the mouth, will you keep going? Because I think most people are going to be what RJ was saying earlier. They're going to be getting up and suing open door.
Or they're going to be a Richard.
The reason why I went with underwriting a deal is because I think if you can do that, that separates you from the vast majority of wholesalers out there. And I get leadership and discipline and all these things. Those are good skill sets that every entrepreneur needs. This is specifically about the wholesaling industry. And I think that if you ask the vast majority of cash buyers, hey, what do you wish a skill set all of your wholesalers that you need to bring you deals had? They would say, I really wish they could underwrite a deal like I do. That's not, hey, I really wish they had the discipline to go out. I think I just had a different idea of what it was because it was specifically about wholesalers specifically.
So the number one thing I learned that I underestimated is the power of the U to take out your camera. If you have too good of an answer, that might be Chris. That's what I've learned during this.
I love it.
I love it, man. And shout out to Steve, because Steve's really talking about resiliency, right? Like the ability to be resilient, not necessarily grit, but really just being resilient, right? Like being able to take and withstand any sort of pressure, anything that hits you in life, business, whatever, having the resiliency to push forward. So, I mean, I think a lot of great points, but I just wanted to point that out for sure.
All right.
Someone vote me real quick so I don't tie CJ. Give me a W.
You're begging now.
All right. We had some great comments again.
The VAs came through.
Yeah, baby.
I want to highlight Deandra said, all great answers is a good question. Agreed. The evolution said, without discipline, nothing will improve. Agree with that. Isaiah R. Cena said, I agree with RJ until coach spoke. You can underwrite like a mommy flower, but if you're not making offers, what's the point?
Shout out to my guy Isaiah, man.
There we go. And it looks like RJ Bates edges CJ on this one with 40% of the votes. He's on the board with a point. Let's go, RJ.